guys, it's Michelle, and today's video is another childhood ruining conspiracy theories video for you guys. I love these videos. I think they're fun. I wanted to do something lighthearted this week. So let's just ruin all of our favorite shows that we loved as children. I think it's fun. But before we get into the theories, let me know in the comments below what TV shows or movies you guys would like me to make these kind of theories on, because I think these videos are fun, and honestly, like, every TV show ever has conspiracy theories about it, so we can dive into your faves, so let me know. But let's get into it. All right, the first theory comes from Hannah Montana. This was my favorite show as a kid. I would say probably number one, which looking back on it, it's not, because it's not like That's So Raven and Sweet Life of Zack and Cody just hit different. But regardless, I loved Miley Cyrus as a kid, and so this was my favorite show. And there is a pretty dark conspiracy theory about how Miley's double life mirrors Disney's agenda. So the theory suggests that Hannah Montana was not actually just a show about a teenage girl struggling to live the dual lifestyle that she was living, but actually a metaphor for the complex lives of Disney stars as time goes on and the type of life that they have to live under Disney's control. So obviously throughout the series, we see Miley Stewart kind of have to go through a lot of struggles to be able to keep her identity as a pop star Hannah Montana a secret. And so the theory is that Disney kind of did this as a way to represent what their stars have to go through once they achieve this fame, when in reality, they're all just regular teenagers. The theory goes that Disney is really trying to hide the reality of these Disney stars' lives behind a polished, marketable facade. They're kind of showing the teenage struggles that all of these kids are obviously going through at the time. Like, I'm sure Miley Cyrus herself really related a lot to Miley Stewart and Hannah Montana, but she was living a double life. And also a lot of Disney stars and child stars in general sometimes have some struggles later down the line or even during their time on these children's shows, and their companies do not like that at all. So a lot of people think that Disney kind of wrote this character, gave her the same name to kind of hide the fact of whatever Miley Cyrus was going through and be able to like kind of trick, I guess, a younger audience into thinking and believing that Miley Stewart was really the real person behind Hannah Montana. And honestly, the only reason I kind of think that makes a slight amount of sense is because I feel like when they marketed Hannah Montana, they really marketed Hannah. Like, I went to a Hannah Montana concert. Like, I didn't go to a Miley Cyrus concert. And so, I don't know, I think this theory kind of makes a bit of sense. So basically the theory continues that Disney is trying to set up this kind of model of how their stars are supposed to be handling their fame. And it's kind of just like this perfectly packaged double life reality that doesn't actually exist. So obviously you see the glamorous life of Hannah Montana, like the stardom and meeting cool celebrities and all that stuff, but then you also see like the down-to-earth side of Miley Stewart, who's just going through regular teenage girl problems. However, I think that it was kind of difficult for Miley Cyrus at the time to have to adapt to this like good girl image that was really molded for her and kind of was supposed to kind of pave the way for creating child stars. I don't know, I think this theory is kind of interesting, and I guess it kind of just pokes at the idea that these children stars are really forced to wear kind of like a mask to become a version of themselves that's acceptable and presentable to society, like Hannah Montana, but really at the end of the day, they are just teenagers. And I don't know, I think it's an interesting perspective on the show, but let me know your guys' thoughts. All right, the next theory is pretty dark. It comes from The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, which was, again, one of my favorite shows ever. And it is a theory that the Tipton Hotel is actually a form of purgatory for the guests. I feel like it wouldn't be a childhood ruining theory without the idea that everyone is dead in your favorite childhood show. That's just a part of the theory, or some sort of purgatory. But this theory actually kind of makes a little bit of sense in my opinion. So first of all, a lot of the events that happen on The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, it honestly feels like a repetitive, continuous loop. Like they're in a time loop over and over again. So Zack and Cody, for example, are often placed in situations that test their different personalities. Obviously, Zack is more of a troublemaker, Cody's more of a nerd, and if you say that you liked Cody better than Zack as a child, you're a liar. A liar. Or maybe you're actually just healthy, because I feel like liking the bad boy is just not a good thing. But the theory continues that each of the main characters of the show represents different aspects of a soul in purgatory. Mr. Mosby, for example, is obviously the strict hotel manager, and he dedicates his entire life to maintaining the order of the Tipton. But he's never really truly happy. So conspiracy theorists interpret Mr. Mosby's like very rigid, overbearing personality as a reflection of some unresolved personal issues, possibly from past mistakes or failures that he must atone for. And of course, Mr. Mosby's attachment to the hotel is interesting because obviously it causes him a lot of stress and discontent. So that's kind of suggesting that he is literally trapped there until he learns a deeper lesson about balance and letting go, and then he would be able to move on to peace. I don't know. I kind of believe it. London Tipton, obviously, she is the heiress of the Tipton Hotel, and fans theorize that her purgatory involves the fact that it's difficult for London to create meaningful connections with others and try and find true happiness despite having quite literally everything that she could have ever wanted. And that's why she's stuck at the Tipton. Maddie Fitzpatrick is kind of the opposite. She comes from obviously a modest background and works really hard and is continuously frustrated by her inability to move up in life. No matter how many lessons that she learns or challenges she faces, she still remains stagnant as the candy counter girl, and it doesn't seem like she wants to really be there. And so her purgatorial experience could be kind of about patience and resilience, especially in the face of disappointment. I don't know, I think this theory is kind of interesting, and I think it makes sense, especially from all of the different TV show purgatory theories that I've heard. It kind of makes the most sense in the regards of Suite Life of Zack and Cody, in my opinion. I just think that you could go in with all of the characters and talk about how they are passing through purgatory at the Tipton Hotel. I think it's interesting, but let me know your guys' thoughts. Still on Suite Life of Zack and Cody, we're going to talk about a theory that's all about Miss London Tipton. So there is a theory that London Tipton is actually adopted, and for pretty nefarious reasons. So throughout the series, it's kind of like an ongoing joke that Mr. Tipton and London basically have a non-existent relationship. He seems very distant, he's busy, he's like a billionaire doing whatever, and London's mother is never really mentioned or talked about. Yet London's father has had a ton of different wives throughout that's kind of an ongoing joke, but again, London's specific mother, we've never met her, never really talked about. So the theory goes that London's adoption was actually kind of a PR move on Mr. Tipton's image. Basically, he's obviously like a rich businessman. He didn't have any kids. He kept having various wives, and to look more fatherly and good, I guess, for the media, he decided to adopt a child. But yet at the same time, his child ended up being raised by several different nannies, and he barely has a relationship with her. I feel like the PR angle of this theory kind of makes sense because Mr. Tipton never really tries to be interested in London's life. And I just think that's really sad, and it kind of checks out to London as a character of having, just that absentee father, and she didn't have a mom because she genuinely didn't have a mom. She just had a bunch of different nannies and a bunch of his dad's wives that would try to hang out with her, but not really ultimately because he didn't really care. And that's really sad, actually. I feel like it puts a really sad spin on London Tipton. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this because it honestly kind of made me sad because regardless if this theory is true or not, Mr. Tipton really did not give a shit about London. That is sad. She didn't have a mom or dad really, and obviously Mr. Mosby ended up being her father figure, but I don't know. It's really just heartbreaking. So let me know your thoughts. All right, the next theory I want to talk about comes from Wizards of Waverly Place. Naturally, Wizards of Waverly Place is obviously a show about magic, so it's kind of anything can happen here, so there are going to be a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding the show. But there is one theory that I found particularly interesting, which is the idea that the Russo family actually has some dark origins that suggest that maybe their magical lineage could be tied to a lot of dark wizards or black magic. So while Alex Russo is not an inherently evil character, she does use magic to her own personal gain, essentially. She is portrayed as very lazy and reckless when it comes to magic, and she kind of just uses it at her will, even when she's not supposed to. Which a lot of people think could point to the fact that her ancestors were kind of on the same wavelength of this rebellious, dark nature. But the thing about Alex that I find interesting as a character is, first of all, she kind of has a lot of depth as a whole. I think if you've watched Wizards of Waverly Place, especially if you went back and watched it as an adult, there is a lot of traits about Alex's character that could point to the fact that she's definitely smarter and more complex of a character than the average person might see in her. Like, obviously, she's funny, she's lazy, she's, rebellious and whatever, but she really does have a natural kind of instinct and knowledge about wizardry that doesn't really make as much sense. Like, even, in the end, of course, the family, wizard competition, everyone was like, Justin's gonna be her because he's the one that actually, studies magic. Theoretically, he should be the one that beats her. But obviously that didn't happen. And honestly, the whole curse in general about how there's only one wizard allowed to be from each family kind of corroborates this theory a little bit, because obviously they would want to be able to control the Russo's dark magic as best as they can, so maybe that is why they made up that rule in the first place. I also feel like throughout the show, Alex's morality is challenged all of the time. Like, probably every episode she is facing some morally ambiguous situation where she needs to make some choices and ends up usually doing the right thing. But it shows that struggle and having to actually decide to do the right thing that kind of makes this theory make a lot of sense, that perhaps that the Russo family stems from some really dark wizards. Oh my god, what if they're related to Voldemort? Facts. I actually think this theory makes a lot of sense, and it kind of adds a different layer to Wizards of Waverly Place that I always felt like was there. I do feel like there are layers to that show for sure. I'm kind of curious about the reboot, but I don't really know. I just think the concept of them having a dark lineage is interesting to me. I think that could be true. Maybe it could kind of be like the Vampire Diaries. I mean, this is a very different, I just wanted a reason to mention the Vampire Diaries. A very different scenario, but how Stefan is a Ripper, and it's kind of in his blood for that to happen. He can become evil so quickly. Maybe Alex is kind of like that, and she kind of has to deal with the back and forth between wanting to use dark magic and being morally correct. I don't know. I think it's interesting. All right, the next theory we're going to talk about comes from the Powerpuff Girls. So there's a pretty dark theory that the Powerpuff Girls were created to help Professor Utonium cope with his emotional issues. It seems like this theory points to the general idea that Professor Utopia maybe needed a sense of companionship, or he wanted to have a family, or he was trying to fill a void that was maybe already there. Maybe he had children and something tragic happened to them. So in order to feel better and cope with this pain, he decided to create the Powerpuff Girls. The professor also definitely comes across as a very lonely guy. He's a single man, dedicated his life to science, and just lives basically in his lab 24/7. So Professor Utonium's desire to create the perfect little girls hints at him longing for a family. And again, is that because he already had one and something tragic happened to them, or is it just because he is lonely? I also feel like Professor Utonium is obviously they call him the professor, but he's their father at the end of the day. He really takes care of them and is pretty overprotected of the girls, and I just think this is an interesting theory overall. I guess the concept of something happened horribly to his own family, so he created the Powerpuff Girls in order to cope with the loss of his family. I don't know, it kind of makes a lot of sense, and it adds a dark layer to such a cute, fun show. The next Powerpuff Girls theory that I actually found pretty interesting is that Mojo Jojo is actually the girls' brother. So the theory suggests that Professor Utonium created Mojo Jojo, and he was supposed to be part of the family, but he was actually created first, and he lived with Professor Utonium, he was getting all the attention, and he was a happy kid. But then the Powerpuff Girls came along, and all of Professor Utonium's attention seemed to be driven towards his new sisters that Mojo Jojo just became evil. I think that this is an interesting theory, but something I actually feel like makes a lot more sense is the idea that all of the Powerpuff Girls are just regular girls. They're just normal people, normal triplets, I guess, and Mojo Jojo is their older brother. But all of the events that we see happen in the Powerpuff Girls are a representation of them just playing, like, their imagination. And so obviously their older brother is going to be seen as like the evil character or the bad guy. That makes so much sense to me. So I don't know, I think that that theory could be true. But let me know your guys' thoughts on this. I want to hear them. Right, the last series we're going to be talking about come from SpongeBob. So again, SpongeBob has been on for like 20 freaking years or something. And there is naturally a lot of conspiracy theories behind it. Does SpongeBob secretly have a crush on Squidward? So a lot of people like to point out that SpongeBob's enthusiasm for Squidward just goes beyond mere friendship. I would say I agree with that. SpongeBob is constantly trying to hang out with Squidward and just annoys the shit out of him. And despite the fact that Squidward really doesn't like him that much. And also Squidward's kind of mean to him. It also feels like when you watch SpongeBob that you can tell that he cares about Squidward just in a deeper way than I think he does about any of his other friends. I also think SpongeBob's obsession and constant desire to have Squidward's approval kind of checks out to it being a crush. And also, of course, it feeds into the whole opposites attracts dynamic between the two. Obviously, SpongeBob and Squidward are very different people, and like SpongeBob is super optimistic. Squidward is more cynical and introverted. And I just think that that type of dynamic is just a recipe for love. I think that makes so much sense because when I look back on SpongeBob, thinking about the times that I've had like a crush on one of my friends or something that was like the opposite of me, like more cynical, I just know that I acted like SpongeBob, which is kind of embarrassing. Like, I just feel like no one is that embarrassing unless they have a crush. I'm sorry, like, he doesn't act like that with Patrick or anyone else. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this. I feel like some people will be mad that I'm bringing the gay stuff in, but you know what? Everything's a little gay. That's just a fact. Anyway, that is it for today's video. If you guys liked it, please give it a big thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of these childhood ruining conspiracy theories, but that is it. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, and subscribe for new videos every week, and I will see you guys later. Bye.